All right, everyone, today we're diving deep into something that's going to send ripples through the entire business world, the EU's Digital Operational Resilience Act, DORA. Think of this as your personal briefing on what DORA is, why it matters, even if you're not in the EU. And some surprises we found digging into the research. We've got white papers, expert guides, you name it, all distilled down to the insights you need.
And this isn't just another compliance checkbox. DORA has teeth with some hefty fines. And it's not just preventing cyber attacks, right? It's about resilience against any ICT disruption, pandemics, natural disasters, even tech failures. DORA makes sure you can withstand these, respond to them, and recover quickly.
Okay, so before we get ahead of ourselves, what exactly is DORA, and why is everyone making such a fuss about it?
Great question. The key here is DORA is a regulation, not just guidelines. So it's directly applicable law across all 27 EU member states. No waiting for individual countries to implement their own versions. January 17, 2025, DORA becomes the law of the land.
Wow, so no more dragging their feet. And you mentioned this isn't just for banks and financial institutions. It's pretty broad, right?
You're right. While the focus is financial stability, DORA's scope is really broad. Banks, insurers, investment firms, of course, but also crypto companies, data providers, and importantly, critical ICT third-party providers.
Hold on, critical ICT third-party providers. Can you unpack that a bit?
Think of it this way. Even if you're not a financial giant, if you're providing key technology to one, things like cloud services, data analytics, cybersecurity solutions, you're in DORA's scope. That's why we say this has global implications. If you do any business with the EU, wherever you're headquartered, DORA needs to be on your radar.
Okay, so this isn't just about the EU anymore. It's about anyone who touches that financial ecosystem. Now, DORA has a structured approach built on what they call the 5 pillars. Can you walk us through those?
Absolutely. These 5 pillars are a framework for understanding the key areas DORA tackles. First is ICT risk management and governance. This is where DORA gets serious, moving beyond the IT department. They want this ingrained in the organization all the way up to the board.
So we're not just talking about having a cybersecurity team tucked away.
Exactly. DORA wants to see clear roles and responsibilities, dedicated budgets for security, regular and thorough risk assessments, and a deep understanding of your risk tolerance. Imagine your company's crown jewels, the data or systems that, if compromised, would bring everything to a halt. That's what DORA wants you to protect.
That makes sense. Understanding what matters and protecting it. What's the next pillar?
Pillar number 2 is about ICT-related incident management. It goes beyond just reacting to a breach or a system failure. DORA demands a robust system for detection, classification, response, and learning from every incident. It's about becoming more resilient with each challenge you face.
And I remember reading about strict reporting requirements. It's not just fixing it internally, right?
Right. DORA has very specific requirements for reporting incidents, and the timelines are tight. We're talking a final report submitted within 1 month of the incident. That level of detail and speed requires a well-oiled incident management routine.
Wow, 1 month? That sounds intense. It really highlights how DORA is raising the bar. What's next?
Pillar 3 is digital operational resilience testing. DORA doesn't want to just see plans, they want to see them tested. Yearly vulnerability and scenario-based tests, plus mandatory threat-led penetration testing, or TLPT, every 3 years.
Wait, threat-led penetration testing. What exactly does that involve?
Imagine ethical hackers, but they're not just looking for any vulnerability, they're using the latest tactics and techniques of real-world attackers to try and break into your system, exposing weaknesses before the bad guys do. It's like a dress rehearsal for a cyber attack.
Okay, so it's not just checking boxes. It's about actually simulating real-world attacks. That sounds pretty intense.
It is, and these tests aren't just for your internal systems. DORA requires that your critical third-party providers, those key vendors you rely on, are also part of this testing.
That makes sense. You're only strong as your weakest link, as they say. Which brings us to Pillar 4, right? ICT, third-party risk management.
Exactly. DORA knows that even with your own house in order, a third-party vendor can be the chink in your armor. Remember that statistic? 78% of Europe's top financial institutions faced breaches originating from third-party vulnerabilities. DORA wants to change that.
So what does that mean in practice? More due diligence before signing with a vendor?
Absolutely. It starts with thorough due diligence upfront, but it goes beyond that. Ongoing monitoring, clear contracts with robust security standards baked in, and even the right to terminate the contract if the provider isn't meeting DORA's requirements. It's about shared responsibility, making sure everyone is pulling their weight when it comes to security.
Shared responsibility. Now, the 5th pillar seems a bit different. Tell us more about information sharing.
This is where it gets interesting. Unlike the other pillars, which are mandatory, information sharing is encouraged, not enforced. DORA wants to foster collaboration when it comes to cyber threats. Think sharing intel on attack tactics, vulnerabilities, best practices, almost like an early warning system for the entire industry.
Okay, so that's fascinating. It's like a collective defense strategy. So if one bank gets hit with a sophisticated phishing campaign, they could share details about the attack, giving everyone a heads up, a chance to strengthen their defenses.
Exactly. It's about moving beyond the competitive mindset and recognizing that when it comes to cybersecurity, everyone benefits. And while participation is voluntary, the benefits of being part of this collective intelligence network are compelling.
It's a powerful concept, but I have to ask, implementing all of this is no small feat, especially with complex systems and a whole web of vendors. What are some of the biggest hurdles they'll face trying to become DORA compliant?
One of the biggest challenges is defining what DORA calls critical or important functions. The regulation uses this phrase a lot, but it can be subjective. What's mission critical for one organization might be considered non-essential for another.
So how are companies supposed to figure out what's critical for them? DORA can't provide a one-size-fits-all definition, right?
You're right, it requires each organization to have a deep understanding of their own operations, dependencies, and risk tolerance. And it's not a one-time exercise. As your business evolves and technology changes, you'll need to revisit those definitions and adjust your security.
So it's about constantly reassessing and adapting. What about vendor contracts? I bet a lot of companies haven't looked at those in years.
You're probably right about that, and DORA is very specific about the clauses that need to be included in contracts. With ICT third-party providers, we're talking everything from security standards and incident response procedures to data protection and exit strategies.
So it's not just about tacking on a few extra lines about security. It sounds like these contracts need a serious overhaul.
It's definitely going to require a careful review and potentially some tough negotiations with vendors who might not be as rigorous when it comes to security. And remember, compliance isn't enough. DORA isn't about checking boxes. It's about fundamentally shifting the mindset towards digital resilience. And that brings us to another challenge, building a resilience culture.
Right, this isn't just about technology and processes. It's about people and how they approach security.
Exactly. It's about moving beyond the IT problem mentality and making resilience part of everyone's job, from the boardroom to the mailroom. And that requires a significant cultural shift, a change in how we think about and prioritize security.
Okay, so we've talked about the challenges, but there must be some upside to all of this, right? What opportunities does DORA present?
Absolutely. One of the biggest opportunities is streamlining existing compliance efforts. If you're already dealing with GDPR, NIS2, which are other major cybersecurity regulations, by the way, DORA can actually help simplify things by creating a more unified framework.
So it's like consolidating all your security efforts. That sounds appealing, especially for companies that are drowning in compliance requirements.
Exactly. And for organizations that are already quite advanced in their security maturity, DORA compliance can actually become a competitive advantage.
Interesting. How so?
Think about it. In a world where cyber attacks are a daily headline, trust is priceless. Being DORA compliant sends a signal to your clients and partners that you're serious about digital resilience and protecting their data. It becomes a mark of trust, almost like a security seal of approval.
I see what you mean. It's like saying we're going above and beyond to protect your data.
That's a great way to put it. And while meeting DORA's standards might require you to adopt cutting-edge technology and practices, these investments can benefit your entire organization.
It's like a forced upgrade, but one that makes you more agile, more efficient, and more future-proof.
Precisely. So while there's definitely work to be done, DORA isn't just a compliance burden, it's an opportunity to elevate your security posture and gain a competitive edge in an increasingly digital world.
That's a great point, but I'm curious, some critics argue that DORA is overkill, stifling innovation with that tape. What's your take on that?
It's true that DORA is demanding, but I wouldn't say it stifles innovation. I think it could actually drive innovation by pushing organizations to adopt cutting-edge technologies and develop new approaches to security. And remember, the cyber threat landscape is constantly evolving, so we need to be constantly innovating to stay ahead of the curve.
That makes sense. It's not about standing still. It's about finding ways to be more secure and more innovative. Now, you mentioned earlier that these threat-led penetration tests can be pretty intense. What can organizations expect when they undergo one of these tests?
Well, first of all, they need to be prepared for a pretty high level of scrutiny. These tests are designed to be challenging, to really push your defenses to their limits.
I can imagine. So it's like having a team of ethical hackers come in and try to break into your systems.
You could say that. They'll use a variety of sophisticated techniques to try to penetrate your systems and achieve specific objectives. And the whole point is to expose weaknesses and vulnerabilities, that you might not even be aware of. They go beyond just finding technical vulnerabilities. They're also assessing your incident response, your communication protocols, your overall ability to detect, respond, and recover from an attack. It's a holistic assessment of your digital resilience.
Okay, so it's more than just having the latest software. It's about the right processes and the right people to handle a real attack.
Exactly, and these tests are done in close collaboration with the authorities. DORA requires these tests are supervised by a TLPT authority, which is usually a national financial regulator. So you're not just going through the motions, you're being assessed against specific standards.
That makes sense. It adds another layer of accountability. But preparing for one of these TLPTs, I bet that requires a lot of time and resources.
It does. It's not something you can just throw together. Organizations need to plan and prepare well in advance, working with their security teams as well as outside experts.
So it's a major undertaking. But as we've said, the benefits of being DORA compliant are significant.
Absolutely. It's about more than just avoiding fines. It's about building a resilient organization, one that can withstand anything, and that's valuable in today's world.
Agreed. Now let's talk about one of the most challenging aspects of DORA, managing third-party risk. We've touched on this, but it deserves a deeper dive.
I agree, and it's relevant for our CSO listeners, who are responsible for their organization's security, even when using outside vendors.
It's that saying again, you're only as strong as your weakest link. And DORA makes it clear that organizations are responsible for their third parties.
Exactly. And this is where it gets tricky because you're extending your security beyond your own organization. You're trying to control the practices of other companies.
Right, maintaining control in partnerships. How do you even start with that?
That's where DORA comes in, with clear contracts, due diligence, and ongoing monitoring.
Okay, let's break those down. Starting with contracts, what are some key clauses organizations need?
Well, the contract needs to define the scope of services and the security standards. This includes data encryption, access controls, vulnerability management, incident response, and so on.
So being specific about your expectations and making sure they're in the agreement.
Exactly. And it's not just defining the standards. You also need provisions for monitoring and enforcement. This might include security audits, penetration testing, or access to logs and reports.
So you're not just taking their word for it.
Precisely. And then you need provisions for security breaches, things like notification requirements, incident response, and liability clauses.
Wow, covering all the bases. But even with a contract, you can't assume DORA compliance. That's where due diligence comes in.
Absolutely. Due diligence is crucial. It's about doing your homework before signing, understanding the provider's security, their track record, their commitment to resilience. You need to know who you're working with.
So what does a thorough due diligence process look like?
It can involve a lot, but it's about gathering information to assess the provider's risk. This might involve reviewing their policies and procedures, their incident response plans, their certifications, their audit reports. It's like a security checkup.
It sounds comprehensive, but this can be time-consuming, especially with a lot of vendors.
It can be a challenge, but it's necessary. Remember, you're responsible for your third parties, so take the time to make sure you're partnering with companies who care about security.
That's a good point. But even with a contract and due diligence, you can't just set it and forget it, right?
You're right. Ongoing monitoring is essential. The cyber threat landscape is always evolving, and your vendor's security can change, so you need to continuously monitor them.
So what does this ongoing monitoring look like?
It can involve a lot of things. The approach varies, depending on the services, the risk, and the vendor's security program.
Right, so it's tailored. But the key is visibility into their security and to be alerted to red flags.
Exactly. And if issues come up, you need a process to address them. This might involve working with the vendor to fix vulnerabilities or even terminating the contract.
So it's active management, not passive.
Precisely. And remember, managing third-party risk isn't just about security, it's about resilience. Your vendors need to withstand disruptions and continue providing services.
Right, because if your vendor goes down, it impacts your whole organization.
Exactly. So when evaluating providers, consider their security, but also their business continuity plans, their disaster recovery, and their commitment to resilience.
Okay, so it's a holistic approach, and it requires investment. But as we've discussed, failing to manage this can be catastrophic.
It can, and that's why DORA emphasizes this. It's trying to help organizations avoid problems.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about one of the most interesting parts of DORA, information sharing. Unlike the other pillars, this is encouraged, not enforced.
That's right. DORA recognizes that collaboration is essential. We can't afford to operate in silos. We need to share information to raise the bar for security.
So working together, sharing knowledge, and learning.
Exactly. Imagine Bank A gets hit with a phishing campaign. Under DORA, they could share details of that attack, anonymized, of course, with other institutions. This gives everyone a heads up to strengthen their defenses.
So it's an early warning system, helping everyone stay ahead of cyber threats.
Exactly. And while participation is voluntary, the benefits are compelling. You get access to threat intelligence, you learn from others, and you contribute to a more resilient system.
It sounds like a win-win. But some might be hesitant to share information, especially with competitors.
There are concerns about confidentiality and competitive disadvantage. That's why DORA emphasizes trusted networks, secure communication, and clear protocols for sharing and protection.
That makes sense. You don't want this information getting out. But overall, DORA is pushing for a more collaborative approach.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that we're all in this together.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. We've unpacked DORA, explored its challenges and opportunities, and given our listeners a better understanding.
I hope so. It's a complex regulation, but an important one. And I believe those who embrace it will thrive.
I agree. Now, I want to touch on one final point, the cost of compliance. Implementing all of this will require investment, right?
It will. There's no way around it. DORA compliance requires investments in new technologies, processes, and expertise.
Right. And that could be tough, especially now. But remember, the cost of compliance is less than non-compliance.
Absolutely. A single cyber attack can cost millions or even billions, and the reputational damage is even worse. So weigh the costs. And the decision is clear.
That's a good point. It's about prevention, not the cure.
Exactly. And that's key for our C-suite listeners. Investing in resilience is not just compliance. It's a business imperative.
Well said. Now, as we wrap up, I want to ask you about something. DORA is focused on finance, but I think its impact is broader as we rely more on digital technologies. The principles of resilience are essential for everyone. What are your thoughts?
I completely agree. We're already seeing this with regulations like NIS2, which extend DORA to other sectors.
So it's not just about finance anymore. It's about healthcare, energy, transportation, any sector that relies on technology. It sounds like DORA is a wake-up call.
It is. DORA is a sign that the stakes are higher than ever, and we need to take this seriously. It's not if a destruction will happen, but when, and the prepared ones will survive.
So it's not just complying. It's about building a resilient organization.
Exactly, and I think that's where DORA's value is. It's not just compliance, it's a framework for a stronger business.
I love that, turning a burden into an advantage. But a lot of companies are probably overwhelmed. Where do they even begin?
Well, the first step is understanding what DORA means for you. What are your critical functions? Who are your key providers? What are your security practices, and where are the gaps? Once you know your starting point, you can develop a roadmap.
Okay, so step back, assess, and plan. And I'm guessing that plan needs collaboration.
Absolutely. DORA can't be done alone. It needs buy-in from the whole organization, the board, the IT department, everyone, and close collaboration with your providers.
Building a culture of resilience.
Exactly, and that's a key takeaway today. DORA is not just about technology, it's about people. It's about awareness, responsibility, and collaboration.
It's not just a digital fortress. It's about empowering the people inside.
I couldn't have said it better.
We've covered a lot today. We've unpacked DORA, explored the challenges and opportunities, and hopefully helped our listeners understand.
I hope so. It's complex, but important. And I believe those who embrace it will succeed.
I agree. As always, check out the show notes for links and resources. And until next time, keep diving deep, because a little depth goes a long way.